I'm sure that you know array has different types. One is a single dimensional array, another one is a multi-dimensional array, right? So this is an example for a single dimensional array because we are just using only one array. When we talk about the multi-dimensional array, the syntax would be different. We are going to have another one here, like size, where we are going to have two subscripts. The first subscript represent the row, the second subscript represent the column, right? I'm sure that you know about it. So now let us work with a multi-dimensional array. So for example, let me remove this one for now. So let's say I'm going to create a variable integer. I'm going to call the data type as an integer. I'm going to create a variable name called student. This one is going to have two subscript. The first subscript represent the row, second subscript represent the column. So here for the first subscript I'm going to say 2. For the second subscript I'm going to say 4. Okay, student is the name of the variable. For the first subscript 2, the second subscript is 4. As I said that the first one represent the row, the second one represent the column. So the structure would look something like this. The first subscript represent the row. I said 2, so this is first row, this is second row. The second subscript was 4, so it's going to have 4 columns. Again, this is an array. Array index starts from 0. So this is 0th row, this is first row, this is 0th column, first column, second column, and the third column. Okay. So this is the declaration of how to declare two-dimensional array. If it is three-dimensional, we are going to have another subscript, some value, right? So in this particular array, we can store up to 8 elements, isn't it so? 2 times 4, we can store up to 8 elements. Even in this 1, 2, 3, 4, down there is 4. So we can store up to 8 elements. For you to store these 8 elements, you need to have 32 bytes of memory. Why 32 bytes of memory? Because it's an integer data type. Integer data type occupies 4 bytes of memory. Since we are going to store 8 elements, 8 times 4 is 32. So as soon as the compiler sees this kind of declaration, it will allocate 32 bytes of memory for this declaration, right? Are we together? Now this is a two-dimensional array. So for the one-dimensional array, what did we do? We used the pair of curly braces. Inside we pass the value, right? So this is a two-dimensional array. In case if you want to initialize the value for this two-dimensional array, we're just going to follow the same. We are going to use the pair of curly braces. As I said that this is a two-dimensional array where we are going to store 8 elements, right? For you to initialize the value for this two-dimensional array or a three-dimensional array or a four-dimensional array, there is 2 ways. First one is, let me do this. First one is, we have 2 rows, right? We have 2 rows here. So I'm going to use first parenthesis to represent the row, and then I'm going to separate this one with a second parenthesis to represent the column. So no, since there is 2, so I'm going to create 2 blocks here. So the first one, I'm going to have 4 data. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here, I'm going to have another 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. What I'm trying to do them here is, I'm trying to initialize the value for this array. In the previous example, we have single dimensional array. When you put 3, you open a pair of curly braces, you put 3 elements, right? So this is a two-dimensional array. There is 2 ways that you can initialize the value. This is one of the way where I'm going to create 2 blocks because of these 2 things. For the first block, this is an element. For the second block, this is an element. So let me show you this one in this picture. So the first set of elements are 1, 2, 3, 4. The second set of elements is 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, is it making sense? Now let's say I wanted to print this 7. Let's say I wanted to print this 7. What do I need to do? I'm going to pick the name of the variable. Name of the variable is a student. In the row, this is in the first index, isn't it so? This is the row 1. And then the next subscript is a column, that is 2, right? I'm going to use 2. So I'm sure that if you have a computer, go there. If you want to print, just try to use the cout statement and then use the array name student. First subscript is 1, the second one is 2. In this case, it should give me the result as 7. It's giving me a result as 7. I'm sure that you can able to see the result as well, right? There is another way. It's not necessarily you have to follow this one. So instead of using this one, you can just use the simple one as well. So I'm going to delete this one. As I said earlier, so this one is going to store 8 datas. First 4 datas will be stored into the 0th row. The second 4 elements will be stored into the first row. So I'm just going to have like this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So even like this, you can assign the value for this two-dimensional array. It's not necessarily all the time you need to use the blocks. Even this one is still the correct way. So if I print this one, what would be the result? It's still going to print the result as 7, isn't it so? Isn't it so? Because here the first 4 will go to the 0th index row, the second 4 will go to the first index row. So when I wanted to print 7, the same one. The 7 is here, first row, second column. So when I run this one, it's still going to print the result as 7. Right? I hope this one is clear. So you can do the same for different dimensional array. This is just a 2-dimensional array. Even if you wanted to have the 3-dimensional array, you're just going to add another subscript and then you're going to put the value. Another thing that I want you to know is this. I can leave this first subscript blank. I can leave this first subscript blank. So in that case, it will be act as a dynamic. You can increment and decrement. So for example, when I run this one, nothing would happen. Everything works as it is. But let's say I'm going to have this one as a 2 and then I'm just going to make this one as a blank. This one would give us an error. So the row can be empty, but the column we always needs to pass a value. Row can be empty, but for the column we always needs to pass a value. Is it making sense? So that's another thing that I want you to know. So now let's say I wanted to print all the elements in this particular array. What do you need to do? So now this particular statement is just going to print 7, right? But let's say I wanted to print all the elements from this array. What do I need to do? You can use the for loop, right? How many for loops are we going to use? So first for loop, let me say I'm going to say integer I, because here I have, this is a 2-dimensional array. So one is a row, another one is a column. So the outer for loop will represent the row, inner for loop will represent the column. So it's equals to 0. The next one is I less than. Since I have only 2 rows, it's going to be 2. 0th index and the first index. When it reaches the second index for the row, the condition has to fail. I hope it's making sense, isn't it so? So inside, I need to write another for loop, isn't it so? For the column, integer j is equal to 0, j less than, what am I going to use them here? There are 4 columns, isn't it so? So I'm going to use less than 4, j plus plus. Now inside, I'm just going to print both the I value and then I'm going to add the space and then I'm going to print the j value. let me add the end line. So when I do this one, I'm going to print all the elements from this array, isn't it so? When I run this one, as expected, what am I printing? 0 0 0 1 0 2. No, it's not supposed to be the case. So now I just wanted to print only the elements that are there. So what do I need to do? I'm just going to say student of I and j, isn't it so? That's my array name. So in this case, it's just going to print all the elements in that array, 1 up to 8. I think the last part of this session is about how to use pointer variable to create a dynamic array. So now we have learned about pointers, how to use pointers, how to use pointers on a function. Then we have learned about array, different types of array, how to access an element from an array. And then now we have come to the final part of this session, that is we are going to learn how to create a dynamic array using a point. So what is the syntax for you to create a dynamic array using a pointer variable? Data type, pointer variable, equals, new keyword, space, name of the array and the size, right? That's a dynamic array. So let me just give you one simple program to understand how to create a dynamic array using pointers. So I'm going to say, let me say integer, let me create a variable name as size, integer size. Let me say, I'm going to say cout, I'm going to say I want to display the size, and then cin, let me say I'm going to get the size. So let's say I'm going to create a dynamic array. Dynamic array means the array size can be incremented or decremented during the runtime. So for that, here is a syntax, new, and the name of the array. Let's say here the name of the array is let me say I can name them as any, but before that I'm going to create a pointer variable. Then let me say I'm going to say integer. Here I'm just going to pass this one. So this is a syntax for you to create a dynamic array using a pointer variable. So first I have declared the variable name as size. It's going to print out the message to the user saying that size. Then I'm going to, or maybe I would say enter the size. I'm going to get that one as an input. Now I wanted to make it as a dynamic array. So the variable is size. So this variable size will be incremented or decremented during the runtime because it's going to be a dynamic array. So it's of integer data type. New is a keyword that helps to allocate the memory for these particular objects that we have, and then this is a pointer variable, right? What is next? So I'm just going to use the for loop. Here I'm going to say, let's say integer I is equals to 0, and then let's say whatever the size that the user enters, I'm going to check them, and then I want to increment the I value. So inside I'm just going to use the cout, and then I'm just going to call this one as an array. Let me say I wanted to print the I value, cin. I will explain you. So ptr. So outside, to create a dynamic array, to come there, then I'm going to create another for loop to print the details. I'm going to say integer. Let me say I is equals to 0, because this one will store the data into an array. Now I need to print those details. So I is equal to 0, I less than size, I plus plus. So inside I'm just going to write that same cout ptr of I. Let me save and try to run. Enter the size. I'm going to enter 4. So it may expect for the array 0. I'm going to, let me just put a semicolon here. This thing is still open, so let me close. I'm going to put the full colon here. Let me save and run. Enter the size. I'm going to enter the size as 4. for the 0th index 4, 5, 6, 7. So the result is 4, 5, 6, 7. So I just have to maybe add a space here so that there will be a space in between. Let me close this one and run. Enter the size. Let me say 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So let me explain you this. We have learned pointers are not only just used to store the address of another variable. Pointers can do a lot of things. One of them is pointers can be used with functions. Pointers can be used with arrays. When you use pointers, you can even create. You can use a. You can when you use pointer variable, you can even create a dynamic array. What does that mean? Dynamic array. The size of an array will be increased or decreased during the runtime. So if you want to store 100 elements, you can store them, or if you want to store only 3 elements, you can still store them. So for that, what I have done, I have declared the integer data type with a variable name called size. Now I'm going to ask the user to enter the size. Then that size will be collected using the cin statement. Now whatever the input that I'm going to collect from the user needs to be stored into an array. So for that, I need to have an array, but this time I'm not going to have the fixed array. Instead, I'm going to have the dynamic array. Even when the user enters 100 elements, my array should be able to store that 100 elements. When the user enters only 2 elements, still my array should be able to store that 2 elements. For that, here is a syntax. For you to create a dynamic array using a pointer variable, this is a pointer variable. I hope you know this, right? Integer pointer ptr. Now, this is a syntax. New is a keyword. The use of this new keyword is to allocate the memory, because this is a dynamic memory. Every time when you insert an element, we need to have a memory. Every time when you assign value for the variable, we need the memory. So for that, we are going to use this new. New is a keyword that is being used in object-oriented programming concept. We are going to learn more about new in the coming session, because as I said, starting from next week, we are going to be learning about the object-oriented concept in C++. So this new will be mostly used in the object-oriented programming concept just to allocate the memory every time when you insert the data into an array. So here we are saying that the data type is going to be an integer, and then the size will be allocated dynamically, right? So now every time, so I'm going to use the for loop. Since this one is going to be a dynamic array, so the first element will always be stored into the 0th index, because it's an array. Array index starts from 0. The first element will be stored into the 0th index. We don't know how many elements that the user is likely to enter. So simply I'm trying to check. The size can be anything. Even if the user enter 100 elements, this loop is going to be executed until 99, until the index number 99, according to this condition. Isn't it so? Then if this condition is true, let's say the user has entered the size as 3, I value is 0 less than size. 0 less than 3 is true. When it's true, it will come inside. So I'm going to print the message array, and I'm sure that you can see some weird things. So I just wanted to print the 0th index in a square bracket. So basically it's just the way array, whatever the user enter, the first time the array index would be 0. I wanted to display that 0 in a square bracket. That's the reason why I had to use like this. 0th index, whatever the value that you enter in the 0th index, first value will be stored, and then I'm going to increment it, the I value. Then when it comes to here, the I value will be incremented. This particular block of code will be executed until this particular condition is true. When the user enter 5, this loop is going to be executed 4 times. So 4 times is going to print the message saying array of 0, array of 1, array of 2, array of 3. Then that value will be collected. Now all those information will be stored into the array. 0th index will hold the first value, second index will hold the third value, first index will hold the second value. All those values will be stored here. Now I need to print them. In order to print, again I need to iterate through an array, and then I have to print all the elements from the array based on the index. So first, when I say I, It will go to the first index, it will print the value. It will go to the second index, it will print the value. Even this for loop is going to be executed as long as this particular condition is true. So here I have used the pointer variable in order to create this dynamic array. So this is an example of how to use the pointer variable in order to create a dynamic array.